Zoning hearing board went smoothly.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is an unusually large crowd.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we should.
I told Bruce to take praise when you moved.
Story building, or are you asking for it high, knowing that it's going to get rejected, and you only want a 7-story building to begin with? You negotiate down. Because then one what's that? 13. So they're not that poor. They're not
There is.
Gotcha, yeah.
Can I do that?
Yeah.
Hi, Suzanne. How are you? Let me get out, you guys. Wait, I'm sorry.
Are they all on, or do we have to turn them off? Lori's playing your
Hello.
Well, I it's Diana, who I'm doing it now.
Yeah. They're all full. I hope so. What's wrong with the door? I'm not sure that the time change worked out. We don't really know.
Yeah. Trust me, I haven't worked out at the time.
I'm going to circulate it down the road.
You're telling me the city's automatic door opening doesn't understand daylight savings time?
I'm thinking
We're opposed to it, so we're just...
Wow. You need really advanced technology to be that messed up.
Technology is only useful when it works.
So it's like a miniature Y2K problem.
It happens twice a year for us.
That was a good ride. I got that.
Where I come from, we have these things called keys. They unlock the doors.
Oh, we used to just put straps on the door.
I have seen the straps.
How's the I like it. I like it. I voted for it. Well, you were the only one who voted.
And then I had to go to the office. So I just think about that one day.
You just played a well, but they're now in the second. I don't maybe are the trees and the bushes and mask that? No. They did?
Yeah, first thing I said, cut trees.
I can work it. He's got to turn it on.
Don't recognize that guy.
Well, he can actually talk. It's a work. You stick your paper on it. Yes. It's an addendum to a contract.
Next to the driveway, quick.
They're not here for the fire.
Nice.
All right, I'd like to call the meeting to order tonight, Monday, March 18th. This is the Historical Commission meeting for the Heritage Conservation District. We have a few things on the agenda. When we do, we'll go through the presentation by the applicant. We'll have discussion and questions from those at the table here, and then we'll follow up with if there's questions from the audience. If there are questions or comments, make sure you state your name before you comment, so Suzanne can get that for the record. Just a reminder, we're a recommending body, so the things we vote on tonight will be a recommendation to the City Council in their future meeting. Item number 1 tonight, approval of the minutes from February 19th.
I move they be approved, presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Item number 2 on the agenda tonight, 221 to 227 North Prince Street. You guys are already here and plugged in. This is, last month we had a conceptual discussion. This is the formal submission. There are 3 items here for voting tonight. Suzanne, if you want to go through your comments, and then we'll let the applicant present again.
There are 2 demolition items, the entire building of 227 North Prince Street, which is Roberito's, and then the 2-story rear portion of 221 North Prince Street, which is the former Empire TV, or now the Health Club, and then new construction of a new 13-story mixed-use building. My review on the demolitions is inappropriate. These historic buildings were purchased by the applicant in September 2018 in their current condition, and the developers assumed risk when they assumed ownership. 223, 227 North Prince Street, which is Roberito's, has suffered from neglect, but there is no evidence that the structural issues cannot be addressed, nor that retention and repair of the buildings was considered as a first option. 221 North Prince Street has recently been rehabbed as a fitness center. The historic form and footprints of both buildings remain intact, which contributed to their listing in the National Register as a thematic group. The rear portions of both buildings are integral parts of each structure, not as subordinate additions on sheltered lots, and impact the second public right-of-way, North Market Street. The submitted application narrative makes an erroneous claim that the buildings are not, quote, subject to the more restrictive rehabilitation requirements of the city's Harb District. Both the Harb and Heritage Conservation District ordinances apply the same preservation standards to demolition requests and the same design standards for new construction applications. Along the row of former tobacco warehouses that have been recognized for their historical and architectural significance, located on a block face that shows relative consistency in the building's masonry construction, heights, and fenestration, the requested demolition is not technically or financially justified and weighed against proposed new construction that is out of character with this neighborhood. In this review are standards 1, 2, 5, and 6. In my review, do you want me to do the new construction?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and do that.
The review on new construction is also inappropriate. In response to the conceptual discussion of this project that took place at the February meeting, there happened a number of design revisions to features and materials, including lowering the height from 14 to 13 stories, introducing an 8 to 10 foot setback at the 3rd floor level, reducing the height of the 2-story facade, and introducing a metal cornice line, simplification of the materials palette, and relocation of balconies from the Prince Street facade to the southwest corner. Those changes have a limited impact, however, on a monumental structure whose overall size and height is out of character with this street and ill-suited to be placed mid-block along the row of historic warehouse structures. Differentiation of new construction as a distinctly modern building is appropriate. The second half of standard number 9 also calls for compatibility with the surroundings. Designs can be deliberately contemporary or can take a more conservative traditional approach without resorting to imitative historicism. The new construction proposed here overwhelms the street and is not compatible with the larger block face, altering the historic significance of this warehouse district. It does not comply with the design standards in key areas. The height is dramatically higher than surrounding buildings and is excessive for this block, making the upper tower the dominant element along the street. Despite the introduction of 2 modest setbacks, the massing of the structure does not relate to the context. There has been an attempt to articulate the lower facade and make a distinction between the base and upper tower. However, the curved south half of the facade and open plaza do not reinforce the street edge and emphasize the south driveway opening. Projecting balconies are not typical of Lancaster, and I have a note that the other buildings cited in the narrative with balconies are less than half the height of this structure, so the balconies have a lesser impact on those buildings. Very tall modern buildings could be appropriate in Lancaster depending on the location, the character of the surrounding architecture, and the preservation or incorporation of existing historic buildings at the site. Earlier initiation of an historical commission review might have allowed the commission members to discuss other options for redevelopment of this site. This review references Standard 9 and the design standards.
Thank you. If you want to go through, I mean, we heard the overarching project last time, and if you want to hit that briefly again, and then you hit the changes that you made, and then there's a couple of additional things in the packet if you need to reference that.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Is this on?
Yeah.
I don't know if it matters. So just for context, we'll start off as we did the last time, just so that everyone can see sort of exactly where it is within the city. It's on the north side, the 200 block of North Prince. It's 2 parcels adjacent to the police station. This is the new iteration that does have several of the things that Suzanne spoke about, and I'll briefly highlight in a moment. Obviously, maybe it's not obvious, but one of the reasons why we were really excited about the opportunity to work on the 200 block of North Prince was because of its location. I know some folks have questions about why not some other parts of the city that have parking lots or things like that. I am interested in those as well. I just don't own parking lots. And so I'm working with some property that I really like the location from a walkability standpoint, and trying to maximize the impact and value to the city and to the block and the folks living in the building that we're proposing. So just high-level overview. So primarily we're looking at a CCRC model, or an age-in-place context. Collectively, between memory care, assisted living, and independent living, or age-targeted living, there's roughly 200, just south of 200 units. We're also including some affordable units in the mix as well, along with some commercial space. Anytime Fitness would remain. We are proposing some sort of rooftop restaurant, possibly some sort of restaurant, cafe, something like that on the ground floor, and or a possible boutique grocer. Sort of some high-level impacts on the community. Right now, it would be probably north of 75 jobs tied together with a bunch of the different commercial entities, as well as the CCRC senior care provider. We do have some multifamily, or some, I guess I should say, some non-age restricted affordable housing units. In the last iteration, we were trying to tie that into the senior community, but through some further conversation, it seemed like there might be more value added if it were just non-specific to age, and it could be open to anybody. And so that's currently the direction that we're headed. We will be trying to create some community partnerships, both in the medical side of things in relation to the service for the CCRC, as well as some other things like Anytime Fitness, obviously, which is a great asset to the community. As far as one of the benefits, I think the real benefit from a foot traffic standpoint is it really does help promote needed foot traffic for the small business in the downtown urban area. And that's one of the things that makes us, location specifically, really attractive to us. So the high-level takeaways that I noted in the last iteration was some things like simplify the design, increase the setback, reduce the number of stories, increase the connection to a predominantly brick city, And just like Suzanne highlighted, we did reduce it by one level. We increased the setback from 3 feet at the second and third level to more closer to an 8 to 10 foot setback. We also brought down the initial setback. It used to be at the third level, and we brought it back to the second level, so the setback is a little lower. We tried to simplify the building from a material choice, as well as eliminate some of the balconies that kind of gave some cleaner lines to the outside. And one of the ways, beyond the pattern of the metal materials on the majority of the building that emulates sort of the pattern of brick, we brought in some of the color ties to the current color of the Roberitos building in two levels, and we'll get into what those colors are in the conversation. So obviously, you look at this particular block and you say, this is going to be a large building on a block that has 3 and 4 stories. Makes complete sense, but I will bring some context to the conversation from a variety of different points. Obviously, this is only arguably less than a block away. It's on the 300 block. And if you look at the closest building, if you're looking on Market Street, it's not the gray building, but the red building directly beside it. I took the highest of the buildings within a very close adjacency, and I tried to show the scale in proportion to its buildings surrounding it. And this is over two stories, or 2 times the amount of height that a building right next door has. It's like 2 1/4, maybe 2 1/2. Similar to the Grice and the Marriott towers. I took the building directly adjacent on the Grice building, on the corner there, and I took that building proportionally and stacked it up. It is north of 3 times the height of the buildings currently around it. Same with the Marriott, the Watt and Shan building proportionally, and it's north of 3 times so I'm trying to say that beyond the zoning and the allowance of height, there is actually some precedent for a building that is significantly higher than its surrounding. And arguably now the Grice building has something that people don't want to change from the history standpoint. It's a valued characteristic in the downtown Lancaster city. So as it relates to this building, I'm not even taking the police station, which is arguably higher, or Pennsylvania College of Art and Design, which is arguably higher than the peak of the Trophy House. I took the Trophy House building, and we're right at that three times the level, the same as the Grice, same as Marriott, from a perspective. So on the block, you're exactly right. It is out of scale and out of context. Within the urban core, it's actually in line with multiple buildings that have added value to the downtown area in the last however many years. So I want to share the reason why we're coming back with the adjustments that we did. The high level is we're trying to find a way to marry 3 important facets and need for Lancaster growth. And one, I will say from a density standpoint, the reason why we're interested in downtown Lancaster from a walkability standpoint is because the zoning it's basically like a roadmap of where the city would like to see growth. So the urban core is where the city wants to see growth. They don't want to see it in farmland from a county perspective. So the density thing was laid out like this to show a path towards progress or a path towards growth. So we're following within that. That's an important factor. Another factor is community need. We're providing north of 200 housing units, which is desperately needed in the market, and is the reason why we have such inflation in pricing on a housing standpoint is because of a lack of supply. And all supply needs to be, at all different levels, need to be addressed in order to help Lancaster become more affordable and to continue the growth of small business from a walkability standpoint. And the last is the value that you all have and you all create and shape here at this conversation, and that's the historic preservation standpoint. All 3 of these things, in my opinion, are needed. The conversation is not one versus the other. And the reason why I am excited about this project is because I feel like it has a balance with all three. And that is sort of where I leave it. And obviously there's questions and dialogue to continue.
Any questions or comments?
Dale, are you doing a presentation or just responding to questions?
I know you have other samples and other things.
I have
up there.
samples, yes. In fact, I can pass that out. Would you like that presentation at this point?
That's fine.
We're not gonna give, I mean, obviously the questions at play are the demolition and concept of the building. So Dale is not presenting a formal presentation like this, but we can go through the building and talk to the building's architectural facets. We did bring some cut sheets along and some other backup as it relates to the request.
The commission can ask their question.
Are there questions, comments from the commission?
I'll start with one. When you were here last month, that plan showed the burrito building, if I can call it that, I don't know what the name of it is, that was going to be, the facade was going to be restored because the city had come in and said we've got some issues with the brick and disintegration. And that was going to be retained, and the demolition was going to be in the back. I guess, well, I'll just finish my question. What happened to the thought of the retention of the burrito, the historic burrito building? And then we get the packets from Suzanne, always a week in advance. And I picked up the Sunday News yesterday, and here's an article that you're here to say we want to tear the building down. Is this economically driven, or is it so beyond saving? I mean, I'm looking at this course, and the people in the audience may be at a disadvantage, and you may want to talk to the horse estimate. I mean, these are big, big dollars to try and keep this building north, if you will.
So just as a point of clarity, last committee meeting, we discussed that we have an emergency demo permit to remove the facade of the third and second story of the Roberito building because the common plane, there's a positive and negative differential between 2 inches positive, 2 inches negative on a plane. So a 4-inch difference on the facade. So the plan the city has requested, which I have complied with, an understanding, an MOU that basically states that I will rebuild the facade if the plans for demo and or for the concept don't move forward. So we are in planning right now, not in planning, we have basically everything ready to execute on the removal of the brick and to add some, I guess, roofing material to make sure that it's watertight. So that's one thing. It wasn't to demolish anything in the back. And the conversation last time as it related to whether or not to rebuild the Roberito building versus provide something new. We initially dialogued with the city, this was months ago, about restoring the building or rebuilding the building and then building behind it. But the takeaways from that meeting was to not rebuild a replica, not to provide a replica. And I know that conversation is there may be different opinions about that, but the design standards talk to that. And the reason why we decided to move forward with this formal application with a more modern perspective is just from a value standpoint. We didn't want to basically take the design standards. We didn't want to replicate the building. We think that the arch and the curve and the lift with all the glass really makes the building much more inviting. and allows for the main point of access, which is more in the heart of the building, to feel light and open and airy and good, as opposed to if we kept the original building, it would change a lot of how the access of the building would happen. Two, the wrap of the building allows us to have more of a visual statement on the building, the historic building that we are keeping. So I don't know, that's from the concept. You asked a bunch of questions. The cost estimate portion. So the cost estimate comes from a fair amount of structural data that we have on the building, and there's a fair amount that we would need to replace in order to not just keep the building standing, but basically take it to a place that we could occupy the building and use it for, well, if we were to integrate it into a CCRC model or any sort of redevelopment of the site, we would need to basically take the structure, make it sound, and add a tremendous amount of value. And I actually think the price point, even though it is high, it came up at $250 a foot for those of you that aren't looking at the dock.
Translate that out, it's 6.525 million.
Correct.
That's a big number.
Correct. It is a big number, but proportionally, the last committee meeting, there was a project that was proposed for demolition that was a historic building that CH&E did the cost analysis on, and that came back at $300 a foot. And I actually reached out to CH&E to talk to them about where they came up with that number, how they got there. So whether or not you say it's $200 a foot or you say it's $300 a foot, the point is it's significant investment to take that building, make it safe from a life safety standpoint, and create a space that is leasable or rentable to like a CCRC, an active adult community. So it would take some significant investment.
Just wanted to make a point of clarity. I think there was some initial confusion that this kind of was apparent to me in our last discussion and came up again now. You had an initial discussion with the city, folks from the city, that they sort of advise you that the design standards don't like you to replicate a historic look. What that is talking about is if you demolish a building and then rebuild new construction, they don't like you to replicate to make it look historical when it's not.
That's a great point.
We really like you to not demolish it and to make it look historical by restoring it.
Understood.
So just a point of clarity there.
Appreciate that.
And when did this conversation with the city finish?
So it was not a recommendation to go forward and give us something new to look at. I want to be clear that it was not that. It was the general sentiment with planning and zoning and historic and.
But when did this take place?
November.
November. Okay.
Yes.
And you purchased the building in.
Maybe the fall of 18.
Okay.
I can't remember the specific date.
Okay. And you only had the structural report done in September of 18. Well, it's dated October 18.
So as soon as we bought the building, we issued a structural analysis and we did a building scan because the intent was, can we keep the front and demolish the back, which was the initial intent. And then the life safety thing came into play. The conversation shifted. And if I'm going to strip the building of brick, well, 3 whites of brick on the second and third floor, does it merit rebuilding? That's how that whole conversation sort of transpired.
Okay, but what I'm taking away from this is like from pretty much concurrently, you discovered the building was, as this claims, the building was unsavable, and you decided to buy it anyway. That tells me that you fully intended to tear it down from the very beginning.
That's actually not, I understand that perspective, and I definitely understand that. That is absolutely not the intent. I did not have a building scan. The building scan is what tipped the scale for me. When I saw that there was a 4-inch difference in plane from the in and out, I obviously knew that there was structural issues. I was thinking maybe I could get away with repointing or something like that, adding some value to the building. But it was to a point where I really needed to strip the building in order to rebuild it, is how I took what I took from that structural report. And I did not make a decision. Internally, you can ask, well, they're representing me, but if there was a, if there's anything that that I would want to convey to you, is I am trying to be as integral as I can in this whole process, because I know it is a very challenging conversation with a lot of different facets to it. And so,
In fact, he started with more of a traditional look, and even the upper portion of the tower was more traditional. This was what was presented at that November meeting.
Have you seen that in photos?
Just put it over top.
Well, I mean, if this is just, me, if I were buying a property and I discovered after I bought it that it basically had to be torn down, I'd be going back to the seller saying, you cheated me, I want my money back, because you sold me a building that's, it's falling down. I don't know why we're even having the discussion about, demolishing this building.
I always wanted to demolish the back part and to restore the front. And I went into it knowing that I wanted to redevelop the site because the location adds a tremendous amount of value. If you look at those properties now, the gym building, it looks fine from the outside, and there's a ton of value, a ton of architectural well, I would call it architectural value. The Roberito building, I knew was going to take a lot of work regardless. So I always intended to develop it. So you said, why would he didn't cheat me. I knew that I wanted to redevelop the property anyway, if that makes sense. I didn't feel like he cheated me, at least. Let's say it that way.
Well, but you're saying you purchased a building and then you found out that it's structurally unsound and that it has to be demolished.
I didn't know where. So if you think about a decision, I can look at a building and I can say, look, I know it needs a lot of work. I can do an initial structural analysis to determine, yes, it does need a lot of work. The thing to me was when I have empirical data on the front, it changed the conversation from can I keep it to I didn't feel like I could keep it because of the impact on the front building, not the back portion. That's how I approached it. So
when you're talking about the front, I mean, when you say it's 4 inches out, you're really talking about the red section.
The blue and the red, look, it's like an in and an out, right?
Right.
So if you look at 2 inches in and 2 inches out over a plane on 3 stories, that's a pretty big belly and a pretty big, yeah. I mean, it's concave and convex.
So on that scan, the yellow is perceived as our plane or
The
red,
wall
right?
plane, right.
The
Where it
red,
should be.
the red goes back into the page about 2 inches. Now the darkest blue comes out about 4 inches.
Yeah.
So if you're looking from the furthest out to furthest in, you're closer to 6 inches.
Right. Yeah, there's only a couple really dark blues, so that's why you're calling it 4 plus 1,
Yeah,
plus 2 minus 2.
Yeah, and now over the windows, you see there's triangular sections over all the second floor windows.
Could I maybe step in here? You were aware that there were design standards for the Secretary of the Interior to deal with buildings, demolishing and building in Lancaster.
Correct.
And this presentation seems to fail on 4 out of the 9 criteria. That doesn't seem to be much of an effort to try and fit in with the historical character of the neighborhood that you're talking about, that you approve of. The building's 13 stories tall. It's covered in glass. I'm sorry, that just doesn't fit with the area that we're dealing with. And you came back this time and instead of 14 to 13 stories. Not a big change. It doesn't seem to match the rhythm or anything about the neighborhood. It was just my comment on what I see here.
Yeah, I think we had a lengthy discussion last month about where your project didn't meet Secretary of Interior standards or the Historic District design standards. And honestly, I mean, you've made some token efforts to respond to our comments, but there have been no meaningful changes to the design. I think taking a story off makes no difference. Setting it back 8 feet has no impact. I mean, I think it would have been more responsive to our comments if you had kept it at 14 stories, but set it back 30 or 40 feet, which would then, kind of more closely respect the scale of the street rather than, because when you're talking a 14-story building, an 8-foot setback is still going to dominate the street. As I said last time, the streetscape is more than just a 2-dimensional facade; it's a 3-dimensional object. There's a roof line to take into account too. I mean, I don't think I need to reiterate some of Suzanne's review comments, but what you're proposing to the small 2-story section in the front, what you're proposing is just not in any way compatible with the street. It doesn't do anything for the neighborhood.
This was in your packet.
Yeah.
Those red lines on the facade are a duplication of what's happening on the existing building. And so when you say it's not respective or doesn't do anything for it, that was an attempt to bring the scale down.
Well, but you've got the height, but you're carving a big chunk out of it in your
at this point.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's more of a modern rather than a traditional look, and that's a request that.
It's not a request. We like traditional. We just don't like
No, it's not your request.
It was the owner's request.
Yes.
Oh, the owner's request.
Yeah.
Well, we don't.
Yeah. But I mean, you could render a new 2-story facade, in a modern idiom, without carving a big chunk out of it, making it all glass.
Sure.
I mean that's you're destroying the street wall by carving it back. You're drawing more attention to the vehicular access of the building, which is a more suburban response than an urban, where we have buildings right up to the sidewalk.
It is also inviting the pedestrian in as well, and that was one of the things that was relayed to us. And just to be clear, as long as he's not asking me to do something unethical or immoral, I will respect my owners, my clients, his pro forma, his program, and his preferences, and try to make the best building that we possibly can. And some of this comes out of his end user who will be providing the services for the senior living. And really, we did go back and take a look at a more traditional look and trying to restore the building. I have that in the drawer. I have copies of that here. It looks contrived. It really fights against a tower. The tower with that really looks contrived. And the marketing feedback was it's going to be more difficult to market that product to the seniors that they need to market.
Well, I'll tell you that, I mean, from this board's standpoint, it's not really our concern whether this building is marketable or not. Our concern is respect for the historic district, the historic fabric. You showed the little Venn diagram at the end, at the very end of your presentation. I forget what the 3 things were: zoning.
I'm going to need to refer to
Yeah.
it too, but it's zoning,
But really-
historic, and the need for the community.
Yeah.
Community need.
Again, community need is not the purview of this board. We're only concerned with historic preservation.
Correct.
You're going to have to make the arguments for the other points somewhere else.
So, can I respond a little bit to? I absolutely get what you are saying, and with the criteria that you have in front of you to make decisions, I understand and I wrestle with that personally. But my objective is beyond just restoring a historic building. My objective is adding true value to Lancaster City and to the people that live here. And the zoning, to me, is a roadmap of where the city wants to see. So the size and scale, I understand, may feel out of context on this particular street. But the only way to meet the growing needs, the housing needs, the economic needs of Lancaster City is by increasing density as opposed to sprawling out over farmland. So from my perspective, I am trying really, really hard to find a balance, and it doesn't necessarily come across like that to you, and I understand that. But you refer to the changes that we've made as insignificant. In my opinion, it's been significant in the whole conversation, in the whole piece, to do exactly what we're presenting here, without losing the value to the community on the number of beds. Without a CCRC model, you need to have enough independent living folks that could possibly utilize the assisted living and/or memory care. And I really am trying to find. I believe it to be a balance, and I'm looking at it from a really broad perspective, and I'm trying to find a way of showing the value on the Anytime Fitness building, because the building is sound. I want to show the value at the street level. I want to find ways of giving, whether or not it's like a little museum, if it's a museum room or something like that, to show the character of what the building used to be there for the Roberito building. I'm trying to find ways of tying back to the historic, but I don't feel like I can accomplish the total picture from a user base, from a zoning base, from a historic base, without addressing the need, in my opinion, the need to, if I can't keep the front of the building, the back of the building, to me, in Roberito's, it basically makes this project infeasible. So like, I've got to go all the way with that or not. It's either I'm keeping the front of the building and knocking down the back in order to get the density that I need to be able to make the economics work, to make the value to the people living there work. Like it's a broad, I'm coming at this from a very broad perspective. So I understand the perspective, and I really am trying to find ways of showing consideration, showing value, and hearing. And I did, to take a floor off does not mean a lot to you. It means a significant amount to me.
No, I mean, I understand. You know, as an architect, I understand, you know, the square footage, and really, you know, what I meant when I said it doesn't mean a lot is the difference between a 13-story building and a 14-story building has really no significant impact. It doesn't change very much. What would have been more impactful was to keep the 14 stories and set the tower back farther.
Yeah.
That would have been a lot more acceptable to me. But again, I said this last month that, you know, the 150-foot height limit is a maximum limit.
Correct.
It's not a mandate.
Oh, correct. No question.
You're not required to build up, you know, 150 feet.
No question.
You know, there are other more suitable sites in the city where a 150-foot building would be no problem. I just happen to feel that this is the wrong site for that.
Okay. Appreciate that thought.
Yeah, I think the issue is all the major concerns that we had last month still exist. So whether it's 14 or 13, we're still knocking down a building that's on the historic preservation list.
National Register.
The National Register, yeah. And so all of those major things still exist, and you can lose a story, you can set back a piece. It doesn't really matter because it hasn't addressed the major concerns that we have. I do think the section there doesn't help with the streetscape, the two-story in the front. You said that last time. I still don't think it does anything, and materials don't necessarily matter, like you said last time, when we're still not addressing what the major concerns are. I'm not sure we've checked any of those boxes at this point. Anybody else have any comments or
I think
questions?
we beat that dead
Well,
horse.
let somebody from
Anybody else on the commission have comments before we open the floor?
Yeah, I just want to say real quick, I think the presentation and your demeanor throughout this has been very, I guess, it's been good. It's not been confrontational, and I think that what you're doing and how you describe it, the city does need more housing. I think the city needs all the things you said. I think it does make the city more design, all the things you said, I generally agree with you. But as a commission member here, our purview is very narrow. And just to look at the design standards, the 5 keep referencing, maybe we hit one of them, and obviously the biggest concern is the height. So I completely appreciate kind of where you're coming from, and I agree with you. All those things are needed, but the fact that we've all said, again, National Historic Register, the last thing this commission is supposed to do is okay demolition. So even if we were demoing and building the same height, we should still have a pretty robust conversation. But to demo it and kind of change the entire streetscape, I don't think it's appropriate.
Appreciate that.